sometime in the late fall of the year, and so they promised it. But it happens that way.
It's coming out in a spring.
In a spring, yes.
Yeah, they'll be very light
Guaranteed.
springy.
To find the right, yes.
Yeah.
The crocuses will be blooming and the book will be out.
Okay, I think now might be a good moment. I forgot to open up for questions after my bit, but I was wondering if anyone had any questions or comments, either on Material Velour, Color Unknown, or on the Wild Book. Well, they are both, yeah.
It's morning, isn't it?
I've actually heard a lot of discussion on whether it's actually by Oscar Wilde or perhaps Dorothy Parker or Mark Twain.
Yeah, but it has those pithy aphorisms, you know. All of them, of course, could be any of those. But
There was a confusion at one point. I think somewhere back in the 1950s, because of a misprint that appeared for later Oscar Wilde books. That was instead of Ballad of Reading Jail, it said the Ballard of Reading Jail, which may explain sort of the number of scenes that were set in empty concrete swimming pools.
By J.G. Joseph Ballard.
John Joseph Ballard.
Yeah.
I'd like to know how you selected the cover art.
well, it wasn't me.
Oh, come on, we all know that you run small beer.
Well, but I think that the using the ace double cover somehow didn't seem at quite the small beer thing. So I think they generally just
They find some clip art, right?
Well, I actually asked Kelly about this, and she said that what they did was they took the ace double art, put it through a shredder, and then reassembled it, kind of pulped it, and then spread it out and reassembled it, and then I think John Piccaccio did a little sketch on it. And then they shredded it again.
Yeah. Because they have attention to detail. That's what I like about it.
And several different times. They had a number of and then Chantan. They went through a series of very good art, and then it was reshredded. So
in other words, exactly the same thing that the ace doubles used to do with their cover.
And they just sell it without a cover at all.
The same dimensional artwork, rearranged, carefully rearranged, can be used for 5 or 6 different papers.
And then they sell it without a cover, and there's a thing that says, this book, there's a small on the frontispiece. There's a little bit of boilerplate that says this book was published, should be published without a cover. If you find it with a cover, unauthorizedly altered.
It's important that we pay attention to the intricacies of how small presses work. I mean, they are a lifeblood.
Well, and it's going back to the tradition of the pulps.
So I was wondering who might like to talk about a book next.
Well, I actually have my book covered.
Oh, I would help. Yes.
So, as we all know, many science fiction writers back in the 50s made their livings writing 144-page paperback originals. Robert Silverberg, there's a website with all of Robert Silverberg's pseudonyms. I think at this point there are like 50-something of them. He batted out 2 books in one weekend. He was really fast. And Silverberg published under a number of names, and a lot of them are porn. And Marion Zimmer Bradley also wrote under a lot of names. What nobody seems to have known until I discovered it was that they did a collaboration. Marion Zimmer Bradley and Robert Silverberg, writing under the name Miriam Beauchamp, did a thing that they thought was going to create a new subgenre of these things, because there were westerns, and there were sex pulps, and there were juvenile delinquent pulps, and there were all these things. They're all paperback originals. And then there was this whole thing of like trash, trailer trash, and swamp. I actually have a book called Swampoiden at home. Why anybody thought Swampoiden was a good title, I don't know. But
I read that blog though, Swampoiden.town. Yeah.
But no, actually, that is a real book. Swampoiden is a real book. However, what nobody knows is that Trailer Gnome
May I hold that?
Yes, and the skyline says, he moved from lawn to lawn, from man to man. And what it is is a book about a homosexual lawn gnome. And what they were trying to do was they were trying to mix high fantasy
I'll just hold it up for a bit.
and trailer trash in a 144-page paperback original. And this book is really, really hard to find. And you can see why, because at the time it was so transgressive, and there were people who had to cover their lawn gnome's eyes when they took them to bookstores, as many people of course do. And I'm just going to read you my favorite part from this, which says. He listened as the trailer door opened. The screech of cheap aluminum like fingernails down the blackboard of the still spring air. He stiffened in the way that only an 18-inch concrete man can stiffen. Rigid in anticipation of the touch of the man he loved. So it's that. And you know,
That's so hot, I gotta
and it's just, you know, it makes you wonder why literature like this is not more popular. And cover art like this, because I mean, really, the attention to detail on the cover art of these pulps is just phenomenal.
It was a golden age.
It was a golden age, and the fact that Silverberg and Marion Zimmer Bradley got together is, you know, it's unprecedented, and no one in science fiction knows about it. So
Do you know which of them wore the red cap when they got together?
Yeah. Marion Zimmer Bradley was a little bit of a dominatrix, and she liked to make Bob Silverberg wear, you know, funny hats.
Wait a minute, a little bit of a dominatrix.
Come on, let's not speak ill.
All right, and
Okay.
but actually, this cover is why Bob Silverberg grew a beard. because before that he was clean shaven, and he had dark hair, but he thought one day I will be an old man with a white beard, just like my book cover. Karen, now that he's married to Karen Haber, she will not let him wear the red pointy hat in public anymore. But, you know, if you ask nicely. So I want everyone, next time you're at World Con, and you see Bob Silverberg, come up and ask him about Trailer Gnome. Just, you know, I can email you the cover, and you can just, you know, print it out and just ask him about it, and the expression on his face, I guarantee you, will be worth the price of admission. But I mean, you all, I mean, you know.
Well, I have to confess, I have never read the book because.
I sent out the assignment.
Well, I didn't read the book because it wasn't written by Miriam Joseph Beauchamp. It should have had 3 names. It was just Miriam Beauchamp. But it does explain a lot about a dream that I once had about Robert Silverberg. We were in the concourse of some sort of huge hotel, and Robert Silverberg was approaching me, and he was wearing a large red pointed hat. And the minute that he saw me, though, his face broke into an expression of fear, and he started running down the concourse, screaming. I had no idea why encountering me would have set off Silverberg in such a way. I mean, he was eloquently screaming as he went.
Well, he screams elegantly too.
He is one of the most elegant screamers if you've ever heard it. But yeah, it would explain a lot where this, you know, somehow or another the unconscious source of that
Right.
Robert Silverberg dream.
I think when we see something like this, when we see Trailer Gnome, you know, it's so elegantly right. You know, you're like, well, yes, of course. And so I think that same, you know, because we already had an unconscious sort of predilection. You know, we had an understanding of what these people are really about at heart.
It's one of the great mysteries unrevealed of science fiction as a genre, that we already have these unconscious images of
Robert Silverberg in a pointy red hat.
Robert
Everybody
Silverberg in a
does.
pointy
It's an
red
archetype.
hat, of people wearing snorkels, walking around in outer space. You know, large.
Archetypes.
I think
Yes.
Or dorkotypes, yeah. I think though that it's not entirely fair to say that it was entirely unpopular, because it did attract a certain following, and I mean actually there
was
were
in Germany.
At that time there was actually a whole subculture and conventions. I mean, much like furries, there were gnomies.
Yeah.
It's
There was
interesting that you bring up how popular it was in Germany, because when I was looking for this book, I could not find a copy on ABE for less than $200.
Oh, no, it's really, really hard to...
As moderator, I found it.
So I kind of...
Well, you ponied up the 200 and then made the PDF for us.
You
so.
bought up the last copies that were on.
chosen an easier to find book, but I was able to find a book translated into German, and I read it that way.
And it was Thailand.
But what I'm really surprised to notice is that some of the details were very different in the German copy from what you're describing here.
Yes.
Wow.
I mean,
How so?
well, for one thing, there tend to be much smaller yards in Germany, and so it got translated as sort of a park statuette thing.
Oh.
And park statuettes, they don't belong to any one person. So there was much more of a polynomness.
Well, and no, they tried
It was polynomial.
Well, they tried to extend this genre of melding, high fantasy with these gritty, realistic, Taylor Caldwell kind of things. But Hillbilly Hobbit just didn't. And that was kind of the end, because the publisher said, well, Hillbilly Hobbit didn't sell, so they never got to do any of the other ones that they were going to get. Tobacco Elf and...
There is, of course, the sad incident. It's a bit of a tragic note here, or an unsettling note, that we ought to mention the incident in which there was a crazy fan of this genre kidnapped Rod Silverberg with the hat and posed him in front of various national monuments. It's a harrowing time. Don't ask Bob about that.
And they had to find really big monuments to make Bob look that big.
Well,
he's never gotten over that.
Well, I mean, there is an issue about who did that.
Yes.
It was Marion Zimmer Brent.
Yes, I'm sorry. I think we have a question or two from the audience.
As I say, there was actually a fairly obscure English translation of this, English edition of this.
Oh, you mean it was translated from the right?
No, no, sorry, there was the English
Translated
edition
from the English
translation.
into
Right.
English.
Yes.
Right. Well, was it translated into American?
It was actually the subject of a fairly infamous obscenity trial in the UK, certainly was in the UK, but in similar way to the Lady Chatterley trials, the thing completely collapsed when the judge asked, "Would you let your gnome read this book?"
Yeah, that is a good point. Yes.
Well, I'm really surprised that no one's mentioned that Brian Froud actually really was a fan of this, and he created his own work based on it. It's kind of hard to find now because of the controversial nature, but he was really a gnomie, and so good gnome, bad gnome. I'm surprised no one's read that.
I'm sorry. There's just so much good stuff to read.
Nobody knows my gnome.
All right. Yes, Daniel.
You have heard that Entertainment Weekly announced that she is going to produce
Yes.
a production of.
Except they're changing the title.
Yeah.
It's just going to be Gnome!
Yes.
Oh, that's so interesting, because actually I spent an embarrassing percentage of last week reading Gnome, the Gnome Kink meme on LiveJournal, and I had no idea that it was related to this book.
Yeah,
there's a hidden
this
fan.
actually started. This is what started the Gnome King. And
I love
and some people pronounce gnome, of course, as if the G was not silent. And mapping the human genome.
There's no need to get into Linux desktop environments here.
There's no
Is
place
it
like
true
Genome.
that this was made into a French short and then remade into Brokeback Moria?
I can neither confirm nor deny.
And then there's Umberto Eco's the Gnome of the Rose. And
There was discussed a political treatise by Noam Chomsky.
That explains Noam Chomsky's little red hand.
We don't want to get too political at WisCon.
Because we never do.
No, that would be uncouth.
fact would be wrong.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments about
Trailer gnome.
Trailer Gnome? Trailer Gnome.
Trailer genome.
Or, yeah. Yeah, I think that was a forerunner to Jurassic Park.
Well, I think
Jurassic
also
Park.
I think there was a big rift in Gnome fandom between the ones the Smurfies and the Gnomies. That was those who there's a lot of slash fanfic too between the trailer
Well, it's gonna have to be
characters
slash, isn't
and
it?
Smurfette and
Right.
Papa Smurf and
Yeah.
Now that I recall, because of Silverbridge's association with a lot of SF authors who used to work for Regency Books, which published a lot of risque material in the 1960s, and Rogue and Gent, and all these things off in Evanston, Illinois, a stone's throw from where I live. There was an edition that added to the title of Trailer Gnome, Hot. Hot Trailer Gnome.
Well, not trailer hot gnome.
Yeah. They tried that.
And it wasn't no trailer. Hot.
In the
No.
late 50s, they didn't do a lot of test marketing outside of just taking stuff over to the main newsstand and seeing which copies sold. And Hot Trailer Gnome sold much better than Trailer Hot Gnome.
Yes. Well, there actually was a controversy over the cover where they had to put the outfit on the gnome. Because he was just wearing boots and a hat and no gloves.
And that beard doesn't quite go far enough down.
It beard does not go quite far enough down, and yet, not unlike Ken, the gnome has no genitalia. Because really,
not on the cover I saw.
Oh,
It was a mock-up. Yeah.
Right.
That's not what Miriam Zimmer Bradley said.
All right, we have time for one or two more comments or questions or thoughts on Trailer Gnome, and then we should move on. No? Okay.